Hey everybody, I'm here with SpaceCoder, the director of ADI's CSS. It's post CitizenCon, and he and I are going to sit down and talk today about the security situation that we see coming in Pyro. And welcome, SpaceCoder. How you doing?
Thank
How
you,
was
and happy to be back on the show.
and how was the trip? You were at CitizenCon. I
I,
unfortunately stayed here in the States.
I was first Citizen Con that I've ever been to, and the biggest one we had so far. Definitely a very fun experience. My inner introvert was having a panic attack every 5 seconds, but and I lost my voice about an hour and a half into my 3 hour booth shift. But I managed, I survived, and I am back to discuss things that were discussed.
Well, how busy was the booth, just out of curiosity?
I'm pretty sure in the 3 hours I was there, I talked to several hundred people and I gave out about this much business cards from the stack. So,
Hopefully some Space Coder card or Armory cards as well.
yes.
Good.
And well, out of 300 that I brought to the UK, I gave out over 200. So
That's good.
that's a good result, I think.
Wonderful. So let's talk about Pyro. You got to sit in the room and see the presentation. I got to watch it on YouTube. I don't know which one of us probably got a better vantage point for that. Probably me, but talk to me as the director of CSS, which is our combat contracts group and support group. What do you see as the biggest challenges as we look at security in Pyro and what we see as potential gameplay mechanics there?
So the important difference to note between Terra, Stanton, and Pyro and Nyx is that there is no centralized law enforcement. In Stanton, everything is under UE law, even though it's not actually the UE enforcing any of it, it's the corporations. But in Pyro, you don't have any of this. There is no centralized law, and the only sort of lawful-ish authority is the different gangs and factions that live in Pyro. And it's not just, pirate gangs in there. There is what they're called Citizens for Prosperity, which is just regular people trying to live not in the UEE, and they were unfortunate enough to choose Pyro to do that. But they're kind of the neutral faction in Pyro, essentially. They're not out to get you. So the law enforcement in Pyro is not going to be law-based. It's going to be reputation-based eventually. Because I think it would be smart of CIG to encourage people to pick the factions they align with by if you don't have reputation with them, they're gonna sell you fuel at a premium because, oh, we don't know this guy. Like, okay, we're gonna upcharge him 50% for the fuel. It's not like we have a lot of it. They're not gonna be selling you weapons because why would be selling this random dude weapons? But if you get some reputation with them, they're gonna treat you as close to a member of the gang, maybe. But that is gonna provoke hostility from the other gangs in the area. And that again forces you to align with one of the factions because, oh, maybe the people you're friends with are gonna protect you if something happens. So it's gonna be, like I said, more reputation based rather than law based, which gives us a different dimension to gameplay within the system.
Well, I think it impacts PvE gameplay tremendously. I'm not questioning that. I think that the bigger revelation to me was the PvP aspects that um, they're going to offer shield tech in Pyro, but only to the biggest orgs that can win the lot or win the bids
Yeah.
to get the shield tech. And I see that as this big, massive game changer in what you know how it's going to influence Pyro. The other big thing that I noticed was it looks like all the high value, high quantity, rare materials are all stuck over in the PvP zone.
Yeah. I have some problems with that implementation, but that's a topic for a completely separate show.
You mean the fact that some CIG devs are pirates and are looking to make people
uh,
their victims? Yes, I
so I
agree.
don't inherently see a problem with that because having that representation in the developer side of the project is actually good for people who want to play that pirate gameplay loop. It's actually good for them. If you had
Sure.
developers who only want to do mining, salvage, and base construction, we would essentially end up with Satisfactory, but in space.
Yes.
So actually having people who are interested in combat and interested in PvP be on the development team is actually very good for all of us.
If they're balanced out.
Yes, but
But
that's
you know,
again a separate problem
the
that
balance
CAG.
is the question.
Yes, that's the thing CAG are
Sorry.
struggling with, have been struggling with, and are going to struggle with because balancing. Because when you think about the grand scheme of most MMOs, and my point of reference is RuneScape, if you remember it or if you have played it, and Elder Scrolls Online. These games both have PvP in them. They're both open world MMOs, but the PvP areas of the game are very, very distinctly separated. And there are quite good benefits to going there and engaging in PvP. But you're not locked out of the good stuff by not engaging in PvP, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be different. I think that that you're basically going to have to go into a very dangerous, high risk environment to be able to get access to the most valuable and the most sought after resources.
Yeah, and
And
that's how we get back to the whole shield tokens thing, which
yes,
uh, it's an interesting take, and I see why they designed this because the problem for CIG was that they didn't really have any kind of end game content for the MMO side of Star Citizen. Because right now all you can do is really grind money, buy ships, and that's it. So they need to add some content to it. And if you look at the level of an individual player, there isn't very far you can go with that. There is only so much an individual in Star Citizen can do. Same applies to smaller groups. There's only so much you can do with 20 to 100 people. But then you actually have to cater to the audience of, well, there are orgs in game that will be able to get 1,000 people online at any given moment. And you have to give these guys some kind of contents to engage in. And that's where the whole shield token, shield stations, and shield projectors thing comes in. Plus, I mean, it's a very interesting way to implement system control because essentially, if you capture that station and the projectors and you hold on to the shield tech, that essentially gives you control of the system because nobody can touch you until that token period expires.
well, and in theory, it sounds like it protects your other installations around, or at least around that planet, if not
Yeah.
across the
So
system. So, I mean, from that perspective, it sounds like little orgs are going to be at a huge disadvantage. I mean, just a massive disadvantage when it comes to Pyro because I played, Arc and Rust and things of that nature. Big boys already have an advantage in that they can build big bases with lots of defenses and have people around to respond. And now you're going to potentially, for the biggest boys, give them the ability to protect those assets with shield tech, which makes them that much harder to dislodge. If you're in a 50-man org, I don't see how you are able to build anything that can last for any length of time in Pyro before it gets raided or destroyed.
well, I think there's two ways to look at that. One, it actually gives the big orgs an opportunity to fight it out and not bother the smaller players while doing it. Like, yeah, you are going to push them out by winning this, but you're not going to be engaging them directly because it's like too small fish to fry. Like, I'm not going to bring out a javelin to fight a 50-man org. That's just not very cost effective. Unless you
Well,
go for the shock and awe, in which case, you do you. Uh,
but here's my point. It's going to turn into Eve. And I think that's what they're aiming for. It's going to, little orgs are going to have to align themselves, i.e., become vassals of the big orgs, because Otherwise, the big orgs are going to go, hey, we got this shield tech, let's use it. They can't attack us,
Yeah.
but we can go raid them unless
And
they're
that's kind of where
part of
the
us.
second point comes in. It promotes that alliance gameplay because CIG love more than anything player interactions, right? So they want us to band together. They want us to be enemies. They want us to engage together. And by forcing smaller orgs to either ally themselves with larger orgs to get access to this, or to form alliances among themselves, because they showed off that alliance option in the org updates, they're forcing that interaction. And the other thing is that Pyro is huge. It's a massive star system. I don't know if you had a chance to play the playtest.
I
I
did.
know. Yeah,
No, I completely agree that, alliances, but the problem is that, the big boys are really big.
oh yes,
And, it's kind of hard when you're recruiting 10 new members a day or, something like that to justify aligning with a 100-man or 50-man org.
Absolutely.
And
For us as an org, it makes more sense to us to assimilate whoever of that org wants to be assimilated and leave the rest to die.
yep.
It's
And I think
way
that's going to be the pressure
yeah,
because, I think it's because having an alliance, if you don't gain the shield tech, doesn't do you a bit of good. So
yeah,
you need your org to get the shield tech. And
yeah,
from the sounds of it, it's not going to be an alliance. It's going to
yeah,
be a org
yeah.
that is going to be
So
able to get that
so
shield
we
tech.
will see how it is. I think what they showed off with the shield tokens and the shield stations was a very, very early concept because as we have proven in the last few minutes, it has a lot of holes in it that are really easy to exploit by larger organizations, larger groups. And,
But no
you
matter
know,
what they do, that's not going to change.
yeah,
I mean,
the only
think
way
about
would be to cut it out, the whole thing, but they're not going to do that either. So,
1,000 100-man orgs is only 10,000 players.
yeah,
100,
yeah,
that's 100 man orgs. I mean, can you imagine having to manage that?
yeah. I mean,
Um,
so there are ways they could gamify this in a way that would be slightly more balanced. And that is
but the
that
big
you,
orgs will scream murder about that if
oh,
they,
yes.
yeah, I mean, and the big orgs will get their way on that, I think. I think this is a gift to the big orgs.
Well, I mean, you could say the same about space station building because
Yep.
only big orgs will ever be able to afford that.
And how many big orgs are going to be able to, how many big orgs are going to be able to afford that and win the shield tech and Pyro so they have a space station there?
Yeah. So,
Those are the real questions. Um, but let's get on to, so yeah, I think this was a big gift for big orgs, and we've been seeing that since CitizenCon. Um, let's talk about you as CSS and the big thing CSS. One of the big things that CSS does is they do escort and bounty missions. Um, I see Pyro being a major environment where big orgs are going to have to set up a routine logistics train. Because from my perspective, if you don't have shield tech protecting your stuff, you don't want refineries, you don't want um, infrastructure more than the extractors in system, because you don't want them to get your piggy bank. You want to
yeah.
empty them as often as possible and get the bleep out of Dodge. So, from your perspective, how do you see that working as we sit here today?
So there are a couple things that are interesting for a big org in Pyro. Number one is the resources. We know, as we established at the start of the show, that these outlaw PvP zones, they are going to have valuable resources, which is going to become very important when construction and crafting comes in. We actually need that high quality, high tier material. Second, Pyro has gear, specifically weapons that you can't purchase in the UAE because it's illegal right now, or you can't purchase them in Stanton. But obviously, Stanton has specific rules on this, Once we have maybe Terra, maybe Castra, this might be different, and you might be able to look into gaining those military grade sniper rifles, grenade launchers, machine guns through reputation with the UEE, but we don't know that yet. Currently, we have to work on the assumption that the only way to get these will be in Pyro through the shops at the space stations there. So,
Well, I mean, it looks like they're going to give us the ability to make that stuff too. You know, a
as
lot of it's going to be quests and, for lack of a better term, and whatnot to go get the blueprint so
yeah,
you can make them. And from my perspective, I wouldn't be manufacturing them in Pyro if I could avoid it.
exactly, but I'm kind of looking at what we know now because we don't know when crafting's going to come in, but we know right now that you can buy a machine gun on Obituary. Like
That's true.
I can tell you right now, I have been there and it's on the armory.
Oh yeah,
So
no. I mean, we've made the jokes that, you know, the first org op is to fly an MSR full of 8 SCU empty crates into Pyro and buy up all the FS9s we can get our hands on, and then
yeah.
fly them back to Stanton. So I mean, I'm in complete agreement that that's going to be part of it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that from a logistics perspective, you know, say that we have a number of org extractors in different places on Pyro. How do we see the logistics working and the protection of that logistics to be able to pull those resources out of Pyro back to Stanton or Castra or Terra?
So the problem there is so Pyro is big. That works in our advantage because it's very easy to hide.
Yep,
If you pick the right place, nobody's gonna look for you there. Which I think is where our security plan is gonna start. Is pick a place where no one's gonna be looking for you.
I
Might be
agree.
difficult to find such places with the material content, but that's something for ENS to figure out.
Fair enough.
Yes, I am throwing another division under the bus because you're not gonna pin all of this on me. And second thing is, which works against us, is that right now, until transient jump points are in, there's only one way in and out.
Yep.
So if someone is camping that Pyro to Stanton jump point, we're screwed. We can't get through, and likely we will not be able to dislodge whoever's camping that jump point
You
because they
really
will
think
know.
that?
Well, my assumption here is that if someone brings a fleet powerful enough to blockade a jump point, they are going to be very difficult to dislodge because we will have to assemble a much larger attacking fleet to remove them from that area and secure it ourselves. And they will A, know we're coming because they will have someone stationed at the exit from Stanton. And B, for them, it's actually much easier to get reinforcements in because they are in system.
Potentially. I mean, it depends on, you know, but again, they're not going to be able to hold that jump gate permanently. They may be
No,
able to hold it for a couple of hours. I guess I'm talking about the more routine stuff because obviously you could always go, hey, if I need to deliver something to Stanton and the Stanton gate is blocked, the likelihood that they're also blocking the Terra gate is pretty low.
yeah. So
That,
that's going to be the second part of it where we need to know the status of the exit points.
yep,
And we, once transient jump points are in, that's going to be a huge boon for us. We're going to need to have someone constantly looking for them when we're in system
sure.
and telling us, yep, here is a jump point. It's this size. It will be active for estimated 2 more hours, and it's going there.
So, what do you think the transfer looks like? Do you think it's smaller ships like MSRs, or do you see it as Hollies or somewhere in between that we'd be using to
I
take
I
those
think
resources out back
I
to
think our best bet
refine?
is small and fast.
You do?
Yeah, either small and fast or well armed. So I would go MSR or C1, or I would go with the Retaliator cargo because that thing has a lot of guns.
Yeah. So you
And
would, and I tend to agree with you. I think something that is in the, you know, sub 150 SCU range,
yeah,
the
y- y-
new Zeus CL, for
yeah. For
example.
example,
Yep.
you're kind of looking for something that's low profile
Yep.
because if you drop in a M2 or a Halsey or above, that's gonna get some attention. Like someone's gonna notice something that big moving around and picking up cargo. So, but someone sees a C1, they're probably gonna be like, whatever, right? Some guy.
Yep.
So low
And if they have a
profile,
couple escorts, they probably can slip through.
yeah. So long range escorts, put a pair of vanguards on it, put a pair of redeemers on it. Should be good enough to scare off your casual attacker. We could also use the new Star Lancer. They have a cargo variant and they have a combat variant on it.
Yeah.
Both very good, I think. Haven't had a chance to fly it myself, but I think it's definitely an interesting concept. Uh, and I think that's going to be the way to go for extraction operations. I think the better way will be to send in some moles, some prospectors, and make sure they slip through, and then just see what comes back or who comes back.
So
If we
you don't think leaving the moles in there on a station that's friendly to them and
It really
pulling the stuff
depends.
off and repacking it and flying it out in a C1
It,
or
it, it
something
really
isn't better?
depends on how the sort of faction warfare and faction alignment is going to work, because we could technically base ourselves out of the Citizens for Pyro, or Citizens for Prosperity station, which is neutral. They have a refinery on there, so we could actually refine and sort of increase the density of cargo for us, which would actually be good. But if it's a neutral station, someone might be watching and they're going to be seeing mining ships and cargo ships going in and out. So we kind of have to think in that, intelligence gathering and counterintelligence sense as well,
Sure.
because we never know who's watching, especially in Pyro. So yes, we could probably do it on a small scale, refine it there, and just like bring it out in small batches. But that kind of brings the economies of scale question, where if we can just bring 100 moles in the Iron Halo in Stanton and be unhindered, aren't we gonna make more money?
Well, again, I think that the issue is going to be they're going to place the rare and more valuable ores in Pyro and not in Stanton. That
Yes.
they're going to
So
force us to head in that direction and, to gen up PvP combat opportunities.
and sort of at least in my mind, the sort of as we get closer to 1.0, when we have refining gameplay, we have crafting, we have transient jump points, my thought is, okay, let's send in, you know, pair of prospectors, an expanse and a C1 and some escorts. Let them do their thing for 2 hours and fly them out through a transient jump point, because they now have the mining capability, they have refining capability, and they have cargo with them. Or you could send the Galaxy with them, or whatever refinery ship you think is doable. I think a Galaxy would be more suitable because it has some cargo space on it, has a bigger refinery, has more firepower, and so on.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think you're going to build some small installations to refine or to pull in stuff out 24/7. Try to protect them a little bit and just empty them every day or every
Yeah,
couple days.
yeah, that's also an option. Uh, Again, Pyro is big. You can hide if you try hard enough.
Knock on wood. Well,
Knock on wood.
depends on how the scanning tech goes.
Yeah.
If they make the scanning tech all-seeing eye, then well, your best bet's to hide in the noise.
Yeah.
But we'll have to
Yeah,
wait and
I mean
see.
that's what I would go for. Hide in the asteroid fields, mine a little bit, refine. If it's in, bring it out. You know, fast, small signature, and we can do a lot of these at the same time. And we don't actually need a whole lot of security presence going on. We could have like a QRF on standby somewhere to cover any retreats if we have any. But I think low profile is the way to go on this, especially my expectation is that we're going to be heavily outnumbered, no matter what we do, especially as server populations increase.
I don't think we're going to be heavily outnumbered.
Well,
I mean,
yes, okay. If we
we're the
stay with the
third
current,
largest org in the game. I don't know that we're going to be heavily outnumbered.
well, yes, but you kind of have to keep in mind that we can only get so many people on a server. So I guess if we have 400 people servers and we get 400 people to come online and we just take
Oh,
over the entirety of Pyro, we can do
I think
whatever.
I think at Go Live we're going to have 15,000, 20,000, 50,000 person servers.
Yeah, so that's going to be a
Oh,
little more difficult to fill up.
well, but yeah, but if you're on a 10,000 person server and 1,000 of them are you, it's not going to really be that big of a concern.
I mean, yeah, but my crazier idea was like, oh, let's take 100 crack pilots and crew from FleetSec and have them like attack something and be like the diversion while everybody else
Sure.
does their mining.
Diversion will be, again, I think the key thing is the logistics. And let's go ahead and save that for another conversation. But because that kind of falls into your bailiwick as well. But I think we both see it that Pyro and Nyx are going to be a big fight. And as they've laid out the stuff today, I think you could agree with me that um, large orgs are currently positioned to do much better in that space. Uh,
Absolutely.
what are your closing thoughts on that?
Uh, if you are not in a large org, now is the time to join so you can learn how they operate and become a part of the bigger picture and maybe share your experience if you have it. Pyro is going to be about two things: watching your back and logistics. Pyro is huge, and places to fuel up are few and far between. So if you're going to be setting up any kind of a larger operations, you can't really rely on any static refueling point because they are very easy to blockade because there is zero station defense and pretty much two guys in fighters can prevent anybody from coming in. Uh, Maybe that's gonna get fixed, but we will see.
Or going out?
Or going out. So yeah, set up logistics and prepare for a fight. And if you don't want to fight, make sure nobody sees you coming in.
I agree. Well, SpaceCoder, thank you very much for being on this and sharing your thoughts. And I think that there's a little bit of a disagreement between us in some ways, but generally speaking, I think we see the landscape. CitizenCon really kind of solidified that we were heading in the right direction because this is all stuff that we saw as an org. And I'd encourage other org leaders to start thinking about what your plans are over the next 3 years.
Yeah,
But thank you
absolutely.
very much. And
Yeah,
guys, remember, SpaceCoder has his own YouTube channel. It'll be linked in the description. And check out this next video that we've done that kicks butt and takes names.